Welcome to this edition of BSW Tech Dive. I am John Lynch, BSW's Director of Business Development for BSWUSA.com and Broadcast Supply Worldwide. Thanks for joining us today, and our guest is Jacob Daniluck from Tieline, and we're going to be talking about a product that they've developed called MPX1 and MPX2, and I'm going to begin by reading from the BSW website. Tieline's MPX1 and MPX2 codecs deliver complete FM multiplex, make that composite FM multiplex, MPX, codec solutions to real-time network distribution of FM MPX or micro MPX signals to transmitter sites. Let's bring on Jacob Daniluck. I've got a key question off of that opening statement. What's that mean? Go ahead.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. And great opening question, too, by the way, because some people are still trying to figure that out or understand what it is. And that's what we're kind of hoping to do here, is to kind of help educate your customers and your clients that are looking for this kind of solution. And this might help them out a little bit. But to answer your question, MPX signal is a multiplexed FM composite signal. So when you have things like your RDS encoder, your FM processor, your stereo pilot signal, all of that gets put into a single baseband signal or a composite signal or a multiplexed signal. And it's ranging in the frequency world, getting into the nerdy talk here. It's essentially ranging from 0 to about 96 kilohertz in the audio spectrum. So way higher than your normal audio feed. Of like when you and I are talking, we're talking between 0 and 3 kilohertz, roughly. Whereas once you get into music, that gets up to the 20s, 22, 24 kilohertz range. But FM goes past that. And that's because we deal with things like your FM mono signals or AM signals. But then here in the US, we wanted to also make sure that that signal stayed intact. So we redesigned that composite signal to work with a stereo signal in there. That's where your stereo pilot tone comes from. That's embedded in this signal. And then we have your left minus right signal, and in addition to your left plus right, which is your mono signal. So left plus right, plus in addition to the left minus right signal, this allows us to create that stereo signal. Point being to all of this is, for years, all of this was happening in your FM processor or a stereo generator tool of some sort, or again in your RDS encoder. Somewhere that signal had to be generated and compiled and sent to your tower site, or to your transmitter specifically. And the problem with that we've seen here at Tieline and a few others, like the developers of micro MPX, a licensed for this type of streaming, we wanted to be able to take that ability to encode all of that signaling back to the studio. So that way we can help reduce CapEx and OpEx expenditures. So that way it's less equipment out at each of your tower sites, bringing back more of that equipment back to the studio, so that way you can fine tune, micromanage that equipment there where you have control of it centrally. And then now just have a simple receiver using the Tieline MPX product to receive the signal and pipe it right into your transmitter. So you don't need that FM processor at each and every single one of your towers anymore.
Well, now that you can do all of that type of stuff, processing, RDS, etc., at the studio and have full control of it there, rather than having to have some pieces of gear out of the transmitter site. Sounds like that would be simpler.
Yep, it most certainly is, especially once you get into those rural areas or those very remote areas. We've had a lot of customers with STLs for years where their tower site's at the top of a mountain 10 hours away from them. Sometimes they have to take a helicopter to get to those sites. And that becomes a very big challenge, especially if you need to change out some equipment or do any maintenance out there at that site that's maybe not related to the transmitter, but maybe related to some of that other gear that's out there. That's another expense getting out there. We're trying to help reduce that expenditure cost by putting less gear out there at the tower site and backhauling that back to the studio, where it's easier to maintain and monitor and adjust accordingly.
I'm seeing on the some of the features, there's one thing in there about an SD card. How are you using that?
Yeah, so great question as well. We want to make sure configurations are always recoverable. So we can store config files on there for backups or restoring configurations. And then personally, I also like to put firmware files on there. So then that way it's just easy to access all remotely through like our two Ethernet ports on the back of the unit for LAN or WAN connectivity, or whether or not you're going over a wireless LAN that you own, or a satellite link that we'll get into with the DVB module that we offer. But that SD card can become a very important backup for those who want easy upgrades or easy configuration access.
With the MPX1 versus the MPX2, now the 2 you can send to two different transmitters. Do they have to be co-located?
No. So one of the nice things about Tieline, and I'm sure you might remember, John, from some of our other products like the Tieline Gateway or the Tieline Bridget, the MPX2 is essentially two composite signals that it can handle at the same time, whereas the MPX1 is a single composite codec. And like our gateways, you can have one unit, the 2 we'll say at the studio, and then you can have an MPX1 at one facility and another MPX1 at a different facility. We can syndicate the same content to both locations. So think of like you have your primary transmitter, and then you have a translator. Same audio going to the same place, same processing probably, or close to. We can take care of that back at the studio, syndicate out to both of the sites, and then through some RDS magic, we can actually reinsert new RDS data at that translator site. So we can strip out the old data for that one specific site and then reinsert new data if need be.
Which is important because sometimes the RDS applies in this market that you're serving, but not the next one. Or same thing with like EAS, same idea in that case. So you can, if that's what you mean by stripping out stuff that you don't need at a particular site, you can do that.
Yeah, RDS is a very easy one because luckily out of that baseband, that composite signal, it's essentially near the end of the signal, so we can just do a filter and just strip it out if need be. Whereas getting into things like EAS, that's a little bit more complex, but I will say we're working on stuff like that to try to help make it easier for people who do need those in different EAS regions. It's something that we're happy to explore with our customers as needed. But the main premise has been trying to help reduce that CapEx and that OpEx expenditure for those tower sites themselves. That's the first step, is how we see it.
Sure. And making a big difference for operations, because let's face it, CapEx and OpEx is, it's either yes or it's we're no longer in business, because you got to be able to deal with all that and be able to keep providing an outstanding service locally for the individual stations.
Exactly. And it makes centralization so much easier, too, at the end of the day, because now you can have four or five of these units back at your studio site. And that's essentially anywhere from 8 to 10 potential composite signals all running out of one facility. You have one set of FM processors for each and every facility. You might have a spare there at MCR just in case you need it in a pinch for a station. And then all your towers now have just the bare minimum. They have a codec, they have your transmitter, they have your tower, and probably they have a generator. But now they don't have other gear there that just isn't needed anymore these days with today's technology.
And I think you covered this, but let's do it again. If you're sending two composite signals using the MPX2 from your studio, and you're going to two separate transmitter sites, you would only need MPX1 at each of those sites. Is that correct?
It depends on what your application is.
So
I always like to think of how many streams or how many audio program signals do you want to come into that one site. If you need just simply two signals, then you need an MPX2 to receive. One for one composite signal and then another for another. Whereas if you have just a single signal at that one tower site, maybe just an MPX1 might work for you. Or how this unit is FM based for FM applications, We do have some clients who have co-located AM tower sites, and they just need a raw analog audio feed. And that's actually one of the nice things about the Tieline MPX series is not only does it give you that composite or MPX codec, but we also do have a traditional codec in there as well, like a Tieline Bridget, more or less. It's squeezed in there as well, so you can have one of those two links set up for your AM link, and then another link set up for your FM link if you wanted to. So there's a little bit of flexibility there, but we always say just kind of think of the number of streams you want to receive, and that's most likely the number you would need associated with it.
And all that in a 1RU chassis.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that we've jam-packed into this little box. And I say little, it is 1RU. So it is 19 inches. It's not the deepest rack I've seen out there, but it's about 13 inches or so, maybe 14 in depth. But it does come fully equipped with like composite in through BNC. So you can just go straight from your FM processor straight into us, and then we'll encode the signal and stream it out from there. It also has two BNC outputs as well and I should back up and rephrase that. It's a single MPX composite input per MPX channel. So if you have the MPX1, it's one channel. If you have the MPX2, it's two channels. And then again, per MPX stream, we also give you two composite BNC outputs. The idea here is you can have an A transmitter, your primary, and then the backup transmitter. If you ever have a backup fail, it's nice to just have them pre-wired and don't have to worry about that. So we give you an A-B switch in the codec, and that's per channel. Then we also give you AES 192 capabilities, which is your digital composite input signal, which is new because the idea is we want to keep it as digital as possible. We don't want to have to keep doing analog to digital conversions. So we've given you those digital outputs natively. Some of the newer transmitters can just accept an AES 192 signal. So now it's an even easier digital signal straight from us to them. And then we're also doing some cool things, like I said, with like RDS data in the codec, where we essentially give you two serial ports per, a primary and then a redundant link. And then we've also added some new protocols into the codec to really help try to boost the reliability of the codec. Not only do we include like our redundancy protocol SmartStream Plus, but we've also adopted an open standard called RIST, Reliable Internet Streaming Transport, I believe is what it stands for specifically. And it's just a new form of streaming audio and video. Now, of course, we're an audio codec company, so we focus on the audio portion of it, but it does make it a lot more robust in streaming between two codecs.
Excellent information. MPX1 and MPX2 from Tieline, what we've been talking about on this edition of the show. Jacob Daniluck, our guest. Jacob, thanks a lot for the visit. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. And if you guys have any questions about MPX, feel free to reach out to Tieline or your friends at bswusa.com.
Or 800-426-8434. Thanks again, Jacob, for the visit. I'm John Lynch, and thank you for joining us for this edition of BSW Tech Dive.